My name is Chloe Mercer. I'm 34, and 3 days after spinal surgery, my father decided my house belonged to him. Late Friday, while I was lying flat with a brace around my waist, he called and announced, "We'll be using your place for 3 days. It's perfect for our beach trip." He did not ask what the surgeon had said. He spoke as if the decision had already been signed. I told him I could barely stand long enough to reach the bathroom and asked them not to come. My mother answered from the background, calm and final. "The plans aren't changing." Then my father added that family did not need permission and ended the call. For years, I had confused surrender with keeping the peace. That night, something in me finally refused to bend. I opened an old folder on my laptop, read the documents I had once been too afraid to use, and sent one message to the only person who understood what my parents had been doing. Saturday morning, their SUV rolled into my driveway with luggage, beach chairs, and catered food for far more than 2 people. My father climbed out, smiling, until he saw the person already waiting beside my front door with a leather folder under one arm. My mother stopped so abruptly that a suitcase tipped onto the pavement. Their faces went white, and I watched from the upstairs camera as my father whispered, "Why is that person here?" Before I tell you what he said next and why they left with far less than their luggage, tell me. What time is it where you are? Where are you watching from? And what is the weather like there? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. The person at the door was Lucas Grant, my oldest friend and a real estate attorney. He was not there to rescue me, and that distinction mattered. He was there because at 1:14 that morning, I had finally asked him to help me enforce a boundary I had owned on paper, but never defended in real life. Lucas stood beside a newly installed keypad, holding a formal notice that revoked every old permission my parents had ever assumed they possessed. His expression was serious, not triumphant. He had spent years telling me that my father's behavior was complicated, a word people use when the truth is too uncomfortable to name. The night before, after seeing what I sent him, he had stopped using that word. My father recovered first. He walked toward Lucas with the same broad, practiced smile he used when he wanted a room to believe he was in control. "This is a family matter," he said. "Chloe must be confused from the medication." I heard every word through the security system. I was upstairs in the recovery room my doctor had helped me prepare, with water, medication, and a walker within reach. I had no intention of dragging myself down a staircase to prove that pain did not erase my authority. I pressed the intercom button. "I'm not confused, Dad. You do not have permission to enter." His head snapped toward the camera. For 1 second, the smile disappeared. My mother moved closer to the door and lifted a canvas bag as if it were evidence of innocence. "We brought meals," she said. "We were coming to take care of you." Behind her, the open trunk showed 3 rolling suitcases, folded beach umbrellas, 2 cases of sparkling wine, and place cards printed with names I did not recognize. Care did not arrive with 14 place settings. Lucas raised the notice and explained that the locks had been changed at my request, that the property was solely mine, and that any attempt to enter after being denied would be documented. My father laughed, but the sound came out thin. "You changed the locks on your own parents?" "I changed the locks on people who told me my refusal did not matter," I answered. That was when a second vehicle turned into the driveway. A black sedan stopped behind their SUV, and my father's posture stiffened. A woman in a navy suit stepped out carrying a tablet. My mother looked at him, and in that silent glance I understood something important. She knew this weekend was not the simple beach trip they had described. The woman introduced herself as Evelyn Shaw, Chief Compliance Officer for the company where my father worked. She had not come because I wanted to humiliate him. She had come because the itinerary he had created used my home as a corporate venue and described it as Mercer Coastal Estate, privately owned by the regional director. My father had told his employer that he controlled the property. He had also requested reimbursement for catering, transportation, and what he called a private venue fee. The fee was supposed to be paid to a holding company I had never heard of. Evelyn asked him whether he wished to explain before the invited executives arrived. He glanced at the windows, perhaps hoping I would appear weak and apologetic and save him from the consequences of his own decisions. "Chloe gave me verbal approval weeks ago," he said. "She's upset because the surgery made her emotional." The lie was so immediate that it clarified years of confusion. He was not misunderstanding me. He was rewriting me. I opened the folder on my laptop and sent Evelyn the recording of Friday's voicemail, the text where I had written, "You do not have permission to use my house," and his reply, "We are coming anyway. Stop being dramatic." Lucas had advised me not to argue in real time. Facts were harder to twist when they arrived with dates. Evelyn read the messages without changing her expression. My mother began pulling at the handle of one suitcase. "This has gone too far," she said. "We should all go inside and talk privately." I almost laughed. Privacy had always been their favorite shield. They wanted every offense hidden inside the family and every sacrifice displayed in public. "No one is coming inside," I said. My father stepped toward the door and reached into his pocket. I knew what he was searching for, the spare key I had given them 4 years earlier, before I understood that access could become entitlement. He slid it into the old backup lock. It did not turn. The small failure seemed to enrage him more than Evelyn's presence. He twisted the key again, harder. Lucas told him to stop. My father looked up at the camera and said, "You have no idea what you just cost me." My incision pulled as I shifted against the pillows, but my voice remained steady. "Actually, Dad, I know exactly what you tried to make me pay for. 18 hours earlier, I had believed the argument was only about unwanted guests. Then my phone lit up with an email my father had accidentally forwarded to me instead of his assistant. The subject line read, "Harbor Line Leadership Weekend, Final Schedule." I almost ignored it. Medication made the screen blur, and every movement sent a hot line of pain across my lower back. But the preview showed a photograph of my house, not a casual snapshot, a professionally edited image taken from my real estate listing, with my address beneath a gold logo. I opened the attachment and felt the room become very still. The document described my home as a family-owned coastal retreat, available for executive hospitality. It promised private bedrooms, a chef's dinner, sunrise meetings on the deck, and exclusive access to the beach path behind my property. 14 people were listed, several were senior executives. 2 represented a company my father had been courting for months. The final page showed expenses already submitted for approval: catering, car service, equipment rental, and a $12,000 venue fee payable to Mercer Coastal Holdings. I searched the business name. It had been formed 6 weeks earlier. The mailing address was my parents' house. My mother was listed as the organizer. My father had not planned a beach trip. He had planned to turn my recovery home into a stage for his promotion and collect money for using a property he did not own. That discovery did not shock me as much as it should have. It fit a pattern I had spent years reducing to harmless family habits. When I was 17, he had taken the money from a design competition I won and used it as a deposit on a car, promising to repay me after his bonus. He never did. At my college graduation, he told relatives he had put me through school, although scholarships and 2 jobs had covered nearly everything. When I bought my first apartment, my mother held a housewarming party before I had unpacked, invited 40 people, and introduced the place as our little city base. Each time I objected, they acted wounded. Each time I backed down, they called the silence proof that I had agreed. The beach house was supposed to be different. I bought it after 12 years of working as a structural engineer, saving quietly and saying no to every suggestion that I add my father to the deed for estate planning. The house was not enormous, but it was mine. White siding, a narrow deck, and a view of the water between 2 dunes. More importantly, it represented a life they had not financed, arranged, or claimed. Still, I gave them a spare key. I told myself trust required generosity. My father heard ownership. The week before my surgery, he had asked whether the house would be empty during my recovery. I said no. I would be recovering there because the main floor could be arranged for limited movement. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Now I understood that he had not forgotten. He had calculated that I would be too weak to resist. I called Lucas. At first, he tried to slow me down. He asked whether the company itinerary might be a draft, whether my father had intended to get permission later, whether confronting him while I was medicated was wise. His caution hurt, because it sounded like the language I had used against myself for years. I told him I did not need help interpreting the evidence. I needed help protecting my home. There was a long silence. Then he apologized. "You're right," he said. I'm treating this like a misunderstanding because I don't want to believe someone would do this to you 3 days after surgery. That was Lucas's flaw. He searched for reasonable explanations long after unreasonable people had revealed themselves. But once he accepted the facts, he became precise. He reviewed the deed, confirmed there were no shared interests, arranged the emergency lock change, and drafted a written revocation of access. He also told me the corporate documents raised issues beyond a family boundary. I could refuse entry and stop there, or I could notify the company that my property had been represented without authorization. My finger hovered over Evelyn Shaw's email address. I knew what my father would call it: betrayal, disloyalty, revenge. But what do you call it when someone uses your silence as a signature? I attached the itinerary, the texts, and proof of ownership. In the message, I did not insult him or speculate about his motives. I wrote only what I could prove. I had never authorized the event, never agreed to a venue fee, and explicitly denied permission after learning they intended to come. Evelyn replied at 2:03 a.m. She asked me not to delete anything and said she would arrive before the scheduled guests. That was the moment the story changed. Until then, my parents had controlled every conflict by making it emotional and private. I had finally moved the truth into a place where tears, guilt, and family titles could not rewrite it. Back in the driveway, my father stopped twisting the useless key only when the first invited guest arrived. A silver SUV parked behind Evelyn's sedan, followed by another car, then a hired shuttle. Men and women stepped out in weekend clothes, carrying laptop bags and overnight cases. They had expected a polished welcome at a private estate. Instead, they found my parents standing beside scattered luggage while an attorney guarded a locked door. My father transformed instantly. His shoulders relaxed, his voice warmed, and the smile returned. "Small scheduling issue," he announced. "My daughter is recovering and got nervous. We'll have this sorted in a minute." That sentence contained his entire strategy: reduce my decision to a symptom, make my resistance temporary, and keep performing until I became too embarrassed to contradict him. I pressed the intercom. "There is no scheduling issue. This event was never authorized and the house is not available." Every face turned toward the camera above the door. My mother whispered my name in the warning tone she had used since childhood, as if one word could pull me back into obedience. Evelyn addressed the guests before my father could. She said the company had received information that the venue and related expenses might have been misrepresented, and the gathering was suspended pending review. No one accused him of a crime. No one needed to. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. One of the guests, a senior vice president named Martin Hale, looked at the printed itinerary on his phone and asked my father whether Mercer Coastal Estate was actually his property. My father answered with a story instead of a yes or no. He said our family did not draw rigid lines around assets, that he had helped me throughout my life, and that the house was effectively shared. I sent Evelyn the deed. She showed Martin the ownership page. My name was the only one listed. My father's confidence cracked at the edges. My mother stepped forward and said I had always welcomed family, that surgery had made me frightened, and that they had intended to support me while hosting a very small dinner. A caterer's van turned the corner before she finished. 2 workers began unloading trays and folding tables. 14 place cards were visible through the rear doors. No one had to challenge her version. The driveway did it for us. Then she reached for the weapon she trusted most: public shame. She opened the family group chat and wrote that I had locked my recovering parents out after they drove hours to care for me. She added that my father's colleagues had been humiliated because I was not thinking clearly. My phone began vibrating with messages from relatives. An aunt told me to stop punishing everyone over a misunderstanding. A cousin asked whether I needed someone to manage my medication. For a few minutes, the old panic returned. Their version was moving faster than mine, gathering sympathy while I lay upstairs, unable to stand without assistance. My first instinct was to defend myself with a long, emotional explanation. Lucas stopped me over the intercom. "Use the record, not the wound," he said quietly. I opened the group chat and posted 3 items: my written refusal from Friday, the first page of the corporate itinerary, and a photograph of the catering invoice for 14 guests. Beneath them, I wrote, "I am safe, medically supervised, and fully aware. I did not invite anyone. I denied permission. Please do not repeat claims about my health to excuse conduct you have not verified." Then I muted the chat. The effect was not immediate, but it was irreversible. My aunt deleted her message. One cousin wrote, "This is not what we were told." Another asked why a family visit required a corporate venue fee. My mother stared at her screen as the story she had launched turned around and faced her. My father saw it happening and changed tactics. He stepped closer to the camera, lowering his voice. "Chloe, take this down. You're damaging the family." I looked at his face on my monitor and remembered being 9 years old, standing beside a broken lamp he had knocked over during an argument. He had told my mother I was careless, and I had apologized because his anger seemed more dangerous than the lie. For decades, I had treated truth like a luxury that could be surrendered to keep the room calm. Lying in that bed, I understood that calm purchased with my credibility was not peace. "The documents are damaging the story you told," I said. "That is not the same as me damaging the family." Martin and 2 other guests returned to their vehicles. The potential business partners spoke briefly with Evelyn, then asked their driver to take them back to the hotel. My father watched the opportunity he had built the weekend around leave the driveway. He turned toward the house again, no longer smiling. "You think this makes you powerful?" he asked. "You're going to regret humiliating me." My hands were cold, but my answer came without effort. "I think closing my own door makes me the owner." Part 5. The signature I never gave them. The driveway emptied, but the confrontation did not. Evelyn asked my parents to remain available for questions, and Lucas suggested they leave the property before the situation escalated. My mother began packing the loose bags back into the SUV. My father did not move. He stood beneath the camera, staring at the front door as if enough anger could make it open. Then he held up his phone. "I have written authorization," he said. "You gave it to me." A document appeared on Evelyn's tablet seconds later. It was a 1-page letter stating that I had granted my parents unrestricted use of the house for family and professional events. My name was typed at the bottom above a digital signature. My mother's name appeared as a witness. For one terrifying second, I wondered whether I had signed something months earlier without understanding it. That doubt was familiar. My parents had trained me to search myself for the mistake before considering that they might be lying. Lucas asked Evelyn to forward the file. He examined the metadata and called me privately. The document had been created 6 days earlier while I was in the hospital. The digital signature was an image copied from a contractor agreement I had emailed my father the previous year when he recommended someone to repair the deck. It was not subtle forgery hidden behind technical genius. It was entitlement wearing office software. "Do you want to confront them now?" Lucas asked. I looked at the walker beside my bed and the medication schedule taped to the lamp. My body was demanding rest, but the old version of me believed boundaries only counted if I personally defended them in the room. "No," I said. "I want everything documented." We created what Lucas called an evidence ledger. It replaced the emotional list I might once have written. Respect me, understand me, please care, with a timeline no one could argue into a different shape. At 4:42 p.m. Friday, my father announced the trip. At 4:47, I refused. At 5:03, he said they were coming anyway. 6 days before that, someone created a false authorization. 3 weeks earlier, the venue fee had been submitted. Each entry linked to a message, invoice, file, or camera clip. The ledger did not make me feel brave. It made bravery unnecessary. I no longer needed to win a debate about whether I deserved peace after surgery. I needed only to show what happened. Evelyn requested a virtual compliance interview for that afternoon. My father insisted he would participate only if I joined. He likely expected to overwhelm me with the old family rhythm, interrupt, accuse, then offer a partial apology once I became exhausted. Lucas warned me that the meeting could wait. My doctor had told me stress could slow recovery and my pain had sharpened during the morning. I considered declining. Then I realized I did not need to perform strength for hours. I could enter, state the facts, and leave. We agreed that Lucas would speak only on property issues, Evelyn would control the meeting, and I could disconnect at any time. At 3, their faces appeared on my laptop. My parents were sitting in their SUV at a public parking area near the beach. My father's tie had replaced his weekend shirt. My mother sat rigidly beside him, no longer pretending the trip was about caring for me. Evelyn began with the authorization letter. She asked who created it. My father said his assistant prepared it after a phone conversation in which I agreed to the event. I said that conversation never happened. He responded before Evelyn could speak. Chloe, you forget things when you're stressed. Lucas placed the document metadata on screen and pointed out that the assistant's account had never accessed the file. It had been created from my father's personal laptop. My mother's witness signature had been added from her phone minutes later. Evelyn asked my mother whether she had watched me sign. My mother looked down. My father answered for her. We understood Chloe's intentions. Evelyn repeated the question. This time, my mother said, no. One syllable split their alliance. My father turned toward her with an expression I had seen aimed at me countless times, disbelief that someone under his influence had chosen truth over protection. My mother rushed to soften it. She said they had expected me to agree, that I usually did, and that the letter was only meant to keep the planning moving. That explanation exposed more than denial would have. They had converted my history of surrender into advance consent. Evelyn then asked about Mercer Coastal Holdings and the venue fee. My father claimed the company was a future family venture and the fee would eventually support maintenance on my house. I had never heard of the venture. No funds had been offered to me. The payment account belonged jointly to my parents. When Evelyn asked why the company was charging for a property it did not control, my father stopped answering and accused me of exploiting a private misunderstanding to destroy his career. I felt the old urge to reassure him. It rose automatically, almost tenderly, because daughters can be conditioned to comfort the person who harms them. I placed both hands on the blanket until the impulse passed. Your career depended on people believing you owned what I built, I said. I did not create that risk. He threatened to sue me for defamation and said he would remove me from his will. The threat might once have worked. Then Lucas calmly stated that truthful documents were not defamation and reminded him that inheritance could not be used to purchase access to my property. I looked into the camera. Keep whatever you plan to leave me. I'm done paying for it in advance. Then I disconnected. For the first time in my life, I ended the conversation before my father decided it was over. Sunday morning brought the climax my father had spent years teaching me to fear. Evelyn scheduled a final review call with Martin, the two Harbor Line representatives, my father's division president, and company counsel. She said my participation was optional. I joined for 10 minutes because I wanted one point entered into the record. I had not authorized my home, my name, or my recovery to be used in his presentation. My father appeared from my parents' kitchen with my mother beside him. He looked tired but not humbled. He began with an apology that never reached the thing he had done. He was sorry the weekend had become confusing. He was sorry private family tensions had affected colleagues. He was sorry I had felt pressured. Every sentence moved responsibility away from him and laid it gently at my feet. Then Martin asked a direct question. Did you know Chloe had refused before you drove to the property? My father said he believed I would reconsider once we spoke in person. Evelyn played the voicemail he had left after our Friday call. His own voice filled the meeting. We've already made commitments. We're coming, and you need to stop turning everything into a crisis. No one interrupted. She displayed the false authorization beside the original contractor agreement from which my signature had been copied. She showed the venue invoice, the holding company registration, and the reimbursement request. My father tried one final defense. He said he had spent his life supporting me, that the house would not exist without the values he had taught me, and that families often shared resources informally. The division president asked whether he had contributed to the purchase, mortgage, taxes, or maintenance. Not directly, he admitted. That word, directly, was his last attempt to place himself inside my accomplishment. I spoke before he could expand it. He did not contribute financially. He did not have permission. He knew I was recovering from surgery, and he expected that condition to make resistance harder. My mother covered her mouth. Then, unexpectedly, she confirmed it. She said my father had told her I would complain, but eventually give in because I did not like conflict. She admitted helping with the company paperwork because he promised the retreat would secure a promotion and that they would repay the venue money after the event. Her confession did not erase her choices, but it ended his ability to call the situation a misunderstanding. The Harbor Line representatives withdrew from the proposed partnership meeting. Martin stated that he could no longer sponsor my father for the regional promotion. The division president placed him on immediate administrative leave pending termination review and ordered the company to cancel the venue reimbursement. He was instructed to repay the non-refundable catering and transportation expenses that had been approved based on his representations. The total was just over $18,000. My father stared at the screen, stunned not by what he had done, but by the fact that consequences had finally reached him. "Chloe," he said, abandoning the executives and speaking only to me. "Are you satisfied now?" It was the question he wanted everyone to remember. Not whether I was safe, not whether he had forged my approval, but whether his loss had made me happy. I answered carefully. "I am satisfied that my no is finally being treated as a complete sentence." Then I left the meeting. Lucas handled the remaining property steps. He sent my parents a formal demand to stop representing any ownership interest in the house, return every key and access device, and reimburse the emergency locksmith fee. He also preserved my right to pursue the false signature if they used it again. I did not demand money for emotional pain or invent a punishment. I required repair where repair was measurable. By afternoon, my mother delivered the old keys in an envelope to Lucas's office. My father refused, insisting one belonged to him. The security log proved he had attempted to use it after permission was revoked, so Lucas added that incident to the notice. 2 hours later, the key appeared in the office mail slot. The family group chat, once used to shame me, became the place where my mother posted a correction. She wrote that they had not been invited, that I had clearly declined, and that the visit included a business event I had never approved. She did not mention the forged letter until an aunt asked directly. Then she admitted that too. My father left the group. That small digital exit carried more weight than any dramatic speech. He had always survived by controlling the audience. Now the audience had the documents. That evening, I watched the sunset from my upstairs window while the untouched house remained quiet below me. I had imagined revenge would feel hot, like rage, victory, or applause. Instead, it felt like a locked door, a muted phone, and the first full breath I had taken since the surgery. 6 weeks later, I could walk from the bedroom to the deck without the walker. Recovery was slower than I wanted, and steadier than I feared. The house remained quiet, but the silence no longer felt like abandonment. It felt protected. My father's company completed its review during my 4th week of physical therapy. He was given the choice to resign or be terminated for misrepresentation, misuse of company funds, and submitting a false authorization connected to a corporate event. He resigned. The promotion disappeared. Harborline chose another partner, and my parents repaid the canceled event costs from the savings they had planned to use for a luxury cruise. Those losses were substantial, but the consequence that seemed to wound him most was social. Relatives stopped accepting his version of events without evidence. Colleagues who once admired his confidence now understood what it had been built on. He had not lost everything because I attacked him. He lost the privileges that depended on everyone else remaining silent. My mother called twice. The first time, she apologized for letting things get out of hand. I told her that phrasing made the harm sound accidental. She called again 4 days later and tried without decoration. She said she had helped create the false letter, had repeated claims about my mental state to discredit me, and had valued my father's promotion more than my recovery. I thanked her for naming the truth. I did not invite her back. Accountability was a beginning, not a key. We agreed that any future contact would happen by phone until I decided otherwise. My father sent one email. The subject line was, "What you've done to this family." Halfway through, he wrote that he was sorry for assuming too much. Then he spent 5 paragraphs describing his humiliation. I did not answer. Lucas asked whether ignoring it felt unfinished. I told him no. For years, I had believed closure required the other person to understand me. Now I knew closure could also mean refusing another trial in a courtroom they controlled. Lucas and I were changed by the weekend, too. He apologized again for initially searching for an innocent explanation. I told him support did not require perfect instincts, but it did require correction when the facts became clear. He accepted that without defending himself. That made his apology different from my father's. We were not transformed into flawless people. We became more honest ones. I updated the security system, removed my parents from emergency contacts, and revised the documents that gave them authority if I became medically unable to make decisions. I appointed a trusted cousin and Lucas instead. That step frightened me more than changing the locks. A key opens a building. Legal authority can open an entire life. During recovery, I also learned how many practical forms respect can take. A neighbor left groceries outside without ringing the bell. My physical therapist texted before every visit instead of assuming access. My cousin asked whether I wanted company and accepted "not today" without making me explain. Those small moments exposed how abnormal my parents' demands had been. Healthy care did not force its way through a locked door, announce an agenda, or require gratitude before it was given. I also created one permanent rule. No family member would ever again receive access merely because refusing felt impolite. On the first morning I was cleared to walk on the beach, I moved slowly along the boardwalk while the wind pressed against my jacket. The house stood behind me exactly where it had always stood. Nothing about the walls had changed, yet it finally felt fully mine. I did not celebrate my father's ruined weekend or lost position. I celebrated the end of a system in which his plans automatically became my obligations. People sometimes call any consequence revenge when they want the person who exposed the truth to feel cruel. But there is a difference between destroying someone and stopping them from using you as protection from their own choices. My father claimed my house because he believed love made my boundaries negotiable. I refused, and the truth claimed everything he had built on that belief. So here is the question I want to leave with you. When a family member calls your boundaries selfish, are they asking for love or asking you to make their life easier at your expense? Tell me where you would have drawn the line, because sometimes the moment that looks like revenge is simply the first moment of self-respect. Thank you for watching until the end. Everything in this story is fictional, intended only for entertainment, education, and dramatic storytelling. We hope it reminds you that you do not need to stay loyal to a version of someone that no longer assists you when their actions keep hurting you. You are allowed to respond to the reality in front of you.